Okay, we're recording this, and pardon the delay, and we're a minute late getting started, so let's try that again. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for participating in this month's technical committee meeting. Everybody should have the updated agenda, and for those that are on the phone, you should have copies of the two PowerPoints we'll be using. I'm going to let folks introduce themselves, and this is always fun when we do it this way. And then after we've done that, I'm going to ask everybody to go on mute, and with the exception of obviously the person who is going to be presenting. So let's start with well, see, what I would love to be able to say is looking at your screen in the upper left-hand corner, but I know that doesn't work. It'd be my upper left-hand corner, and that'd be the end of it.
It's Brady bunch of changes all over the place.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Well, since you piped up first, go ahead, John. We'll start with you.
Thank you. John McCarthy, Senior Advisor with Piedmont Environmental Council.
Thank you, John. Hey, Brent, how about you?
I'm Brent Hunsinger, River Steward with Friends of the Rappahannock and State Policy Coordinator.
Thank you. And now for the Governor's Office. Go off mute, Greg. You're on mute, Greg. One of the things I've learned with this is you have to allow it more time than you would for a face-to-face meeting. All right, well, that's Greg Evans, and we'll hear him at some point. And let's try Deirdre.
Deirdre Clark, Director.
Oh, Deirdre, your sound went off right as you got to Director.
John Marshall, Soil and Water.
Excellent. All right, Michelle.
Michelle Edwards, Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission.
Great. Ben.
Good morning. This is Ben Rowe. I'm National Affairs Coordinator for Virginia Farm Bureau.
Bill. Bill Atney. All right. Either he's on mute or he isn't hearing me. Patrick. Okay, Patrick Money or someone else sitting in his stead is with us. Brian.
Brian Hoffman, Deputy Director with Friends of the Rappahannock.
Okay, great. And let's see, Emily.
Hi, good morning. Emily Francis with New Dominion Solutions. I'm a consultant with the Agua Fund, and we'll be talking more about soil health in just a little bit.
Okay, great. And I'm getting, let's see, got a couple other people to let in who are joining us now. All right, we were in the process of doing introductions. My apologies for those late arrivals. I didn't click you in. Courtney, would you introduce yourself? Courtney? Okay. How about Dave? All right, Dave Evans. Dave Evans is with us from DEQ. And let's try to do this without everybody jumping at the same time. There's some folks who have called in that I cannot identify, so I'm going to have to ask them to self-identify.
And this is Brian Bays, Virginia Department of Forestry.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Welcome. Who else is on the phone? Okay, I see Kevin Burns finally was able to access. You're on mute, Kevin.
Hey, Eldon.
Yes.
Eldon, this is Dave Evans. I'm listening in by phone and I see the video as well.
Oh, good. All right. Welcome, Dave. Kevin. All right. Kevin Burns is with us. He's just on mute. All right. Who have I missed that has not been introduced?
Hello, everybody. I'm unmuted. Kevin Burns, unmuted.
Okay. Welcome.
Eldon, this is Greg Evans. Am I still on mute?
You're
No,
good
we
now.
heard you now.
Okay, thank you.
All
Well,
right.
this is Rory McGuire. I'm probably new to most of the people on here. A professor and extension specialist with Virginia Tech. Run the soil testing lab and do a few other things, and I'll be talking to you about soil health in a little bit.
Okay, so Roy, we identify you with that large piece of farm equipment in the background.
That's right. Nice big manure injector that's now in Virginia.
Manure injector. Thank you for educating me. I appreciate that. All right. Somehow I'm so disappointed that Bill Latney isn't piping in at this point because he would appreciate that video. Okay, who else has not identified themselves? Anybody?
Hi, this is Maggie Bloomstrom with the Piedmont Environmental Council. I'm new to this group and newish to PEC, and I serve as the Rappahannock Rapidan Conservation Initiative Coordinator.
And that was Maggie Blumstrom?
Yep.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thanks.
Good morning, Eldon. This is Patrick Monty at the Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission. Michelle's here, but I'm also here, and we also have a new planner, Matthew Decatur, so that's why we're calling in today, just to listen in.
Okay, and Matthew's last name, say it again?
Decatur.
Decatur. Okay, very good. All right, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. I'm assuming that everybody's just about zoomed out now in their worlds the last 2 months, but here we go again. This is our second time doing this. It worked reasonably well last time, and the recording worked, and the recording has been posted to our website. So we're meeting the public meeting requirements that now exist, even though this is not officially a public body, so we don't technically have to do that. We're going to try to follow those protocols. It's also giving us the ability to test that so that we can pull off our first Rappahannock River Basin Commission meeting of the year, since our March one was canceled when everything kind of blew up the week before the commission meeting, and all public meetings were canceled. We will be doing a June 17 commission meeting. Confirmed that with Delegate Hodges yesterday. It will be virtual. It will be on this Zoom platform. The meeting notice and tentative agenda will go out later today. Okay, I've now committed myself. Everything should fall into place for that, and we'll see how that process works. Okay, moving on into the agenda. A very quick update on phase 3 of the Healthy Watershed Forest Project, and then we're going to move to our two guest speakers on talking about the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Healthy Watershed Forest phase 3, needless to say, the current pandemic situation has had as much of an impact on that as everything else we've all been doing, making it all the more difficult. We talked last month, Orange County had gone through personnel changes and had kind of fallen back in terms of serving as one of the 2 pilot localities. Fauquier County is in the process of making the decision. Those of you who know Fauquier well, Deirdre, John, they are very deliberate in their decision-making process. And they had a presentation at their last, not the immediate last, but the one before that board meeting. The reception by the board members was positive, but the board members asked that staff do some additional evaluation and report back. The county administrator has designated one of their senior planning staff to lead that evaluation and report back effort. Many of you know him, Andrew Hopewell. I have had two lengthy phone calls with Andrew and shared a great deal of data and information with him. So he's in the process of putting that information together for the county administrator and ultimately, I guess, back to the board. And that would be their June meeting. They meet once a month. So that's really where we stand. We've been in this holding pattern between the transition in Orange County and the impacts of the pandemic. So that kind of is where we are at this point. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any. Otherwise, we can move on. I'll pause for a second.
Eldon, this is Kevin. Do you know if Greg, I guess he's listening, might have approached the endowment for possible extension, so maybe we can get a little more traction in Fauquier County before we report out results?
Well, before Greg answers that, let me just say, if Greg goes for an extension, that means Greg can't retire at the end of June.
Well, I know he is conflicted in that regard.
Okay, Greg, go ahead.
Am I off? Oh, okay. Yeah. The answer to Kevin's question, we can't get an extension on this, but as Eldon says, guys, I am going to be heeding John Muir's comments to the mountains are calling and I must go at the end of this month. So Eldon will be the your lead on all this going forward. And I've appreciated the opportunity to work with you guys so much for the last 4 years.
Okay, and that's let's see. You said you were quoting, what was that, John Muir?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I'll quote somebody a little less famous. He was a former public works director for me back in my county government days, and he would refer to that as a strategic withdrawal.
I noticed it was not Sherman-esque, however. So.
So appropriate given what's on the History Channel right now, right? Okay, with that, I'm going to introduce Emily Francis. And Emily, you want us to run your PowerPoint for you?
If you could, that'd be great. I have yet to figure out the technology of having both my notes and the slideshow on my computer, so appreciate you doing that.
No problem. Paige Tate with our staff here is going to run it. So you just, Emily, sing out when you want her to advance slides once she gets things. Yep, we're loading the proper mode right now. There you go.
Great, thank you. And first of all, let me thank you for the invitation to join you all for your conversation today to talk a little bit about the Soil Health Coalition. As Eldon said, my name is Emily Francis. I'm a consultant with the Agua Fund. Agua Fund is a philanthropic organization, and they are committed to protecting water quality and does so by focusing on the intersection of food, land, and water. And also joining me is Rory McGuire, professor and extension specialist at Virginia Tech. And he has significant expertise in soil and manure management and nutrient management and watershed protections and a long list of things. So Rory is the expert on these issues for sure. And we plan to take, Eldon has given us, about 20 minutes to share with you our perspectives on soil health, the coalition itself, the work that we're doing to actually just develop a statewide strategy, and of course, Virginia Tech's recent award from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Innovative Nutrient and Sediment Reduction Grant. And afterwards, obviously, we'll take questions. I'm obviously very curious to hear feedback that you all have. I imagine you all have been working in this space for quite some time, and so would love to explore additional opportunities for collaborative work in the region. So let me also just kind of start by saying that here in Virginia, we have a lot of active efforts to advance soil health. Many groups have spent decades doing this. So obviously the soil and water conservation districts with their historic charge to conserve soil resources. Obviously, as you all are well aware, Virginia has a long-running and successful program to support farmers who implement ag best management practices. We have federally funded programs and conservationists in the state who also spend a good amount of time to support and encourage farmers to implement good practices on their land. Obviously, we also have nonprofits, academic institutions, and other conservationists who are in the state doing this good, hard work on the ground and have been doing it for decades. So I think it's important to acknowledge that before we talk about this new momentum around soil health. So it's new momentum, but the issue, as many folks have said to me, soil health is not new. People have been working to conserve and strengthen the soil and improve the soil for decades. So just want to acknowledge that. So the excitement around soil health is really garnering its national attention. In addition to I think the water quality benefits that we are well aware of and folks, again, have been working on with respect to the Bay TMDL, the kind of additional piece here that I think people are really excited about is the carbon sequestration opportunity that soil health presents. So again, it's not just this water quality benefit, there's also this carbon sink benefit. Again, it's been happening forever. It's just people are, let me say, finally catching on and really focused on this particular piece of it. So folks around the country are working to generate protocols for soil health carbon market registries and to be able to quantify the carbon sink and be able to market and trade that particular benefit in this current kind of climate-oriented space that we're in right now. So let's go to slide 2. The next slide, please, Paige. And so this is how we think about soil health. This is NRCS's definition. Ultimately, healthy soil is a living ecosystem. And it can be measured by the amount of carbon in the soil. It's just that simple. Next slide, please. And just so you have a visual, and many of you probably know this, but just so you have a visual, healthy soil on the right with good structure and long roots and nice porosity, and less healthy soil is on the left, more compact, not as good structure. Next slide, please. These are, again, kind of how we think about the basic principles of soil health. This is also from NRCS. And it's essentially the philosophy that producers can embrace for a whole farm approach to the work that they're doing on their farm with respect to soil. So the two kind of categories on the right protect the soil structure, the aggregates, and protect organic matter or increase organic matter in the soil. And you can see the benefits, some of the benefits associated with those activities. So minimizing disturbance of the soil and maximizing the soil cover. And the two on the left, the two kind of components or principles on the left, feed and diversify the soil biota. And again, you can see some of the benefits of those activities. So ultimately, to build healthy soil, we need to protect the structure and feed the critters. Let's go to the next slide. And this will probably also look very familiar to you all. This is Chris Lawrence's balance sheet of soil health practices. So listings of practices that tend to promote soil health on the right and tend to reduce soil health on the left. And we'll go to the next slide. And so I think this is the space in which many people are getting more and more excited about soil health. practices that enhance soil health, generate significant off-farm benefits. Obviously, we've been talking about this for decades here in Virginia with respect to the TMDL, with respect to improving local water quality. But also, again, there's this additional carbon sequestration component that has many people at the national level, at the state level, at the local level excited about climate action and reducing greenhouse gases. I also just want to mention that in addition to kind of reducing, or actually serving as a carbon sink on the farm, many of these practices actually reduce greenhouse gases in terms of outputs from the farm. So no-till saves fuel use. So that's just one example of how there's really a double benefit to some of these practices as well. Let's go to the next slide. And of course, none of this works unless there's on-farm benefit too. And so these practices, soil health work and these practices on the farm have to make economic sense to the farmer. We need farms to remain viable. Unfortunately, we lose farms every year here in the state. And so the practices must benefit the farmer and the bottom line business perspective. And so there is evidence, there is rationale, there is numbers to back it up that these practices are significant on-farm benefits as well. Let's go to the next slide. So I think you all probably know this, but Virginia farmers are already building healthy soil. And so these are just some of the numbers from USDA's, the Virginia Ag Statistics. And this is happening in state, and we want to help encourage more of it. And so I'm not going to run through the numbers here, but this is obviously, these are significant practices on significant areas of land that have a huge benefit, again, not only to water quality, but also to other aspects of our environment as well. And so we need to do more of this, and we want to help support farmers, find the resources, and make sure that more of these practices are getting on the ground. I will say that we are in the process of working with DEQ and the Secretary of Natural Resources to quantify how these ag practices, these soil health ag practices, actually sequester carbon. So much like the Bay model that tracks nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment pollution reductions, NRCS has a greenhouse gas model. It's called Comet Planner, and you can count up county by county, practice by practice, you can count up the greenhouse gas reductions based on the practices on the ground. So we're in the midst of figuring that out so we can put some numbers on that and be able to build and grow from there. Let's go to the next slide. And again, you all know very well the phase 3 watershed implementation plan. These practices are in there. So in a lot of ways, this is not new. It again is just a new aspect, a new co-benefit of much of the work that's been happening for quite some time. Let's go to the next slide, and I want to shift to the Soil Health Coalition itself. So let's see. These are some of the logos of some initial members of the Soil Health Coalition. This coalition was started by Chris Lawrence, who's the state cropland agronomist at Virginia Nrcs, as a way to educate and encourage soil health building practices and to identify and collaborate with allies who are doing this work as well. So up until now, it has been a very loose, informal group of organizations that support healthy soil. And as the concept of soil health has gained traction, the coalition is growing and seeking to expand its coordination. And so if you go to the next slide page, this lists out some of the kind of purposes or the role that we hope the coalition will fulfill. So Chris started this in 2013 or 2014. And obviously the grant that Rory will be talking about, the NIFWIF grant that we received, that Virginia Tech received this year, is a huge influx to kind of help create the backbone, create the structure for the coalition. And again, these are the things that we're hoping to do. So increase communication, increase shared knowledge around soil health, obviously better support farmers on the ground, educate decision makers, and then proactively advance strategies. So we have a draft strategy that we've been batting around for quite a few months now. But really, when we formalize and create the coalition, the idea is for the folks who opt in, who want to participate, it is up to the coalition itself to identify the priorities. What are the most important policies to put forward? What are the most important programs to find resources for, to get on the ground to support farmers? And so we are just really in the beginning phases of a structured coalition that will move forward during the 3-year portion of the grant, and obviously beyond that as well. So let's go to the next slide. So these are 4 of the strategic priorities of the coalition, kind of the big buckets that are out there. So we want to help support and advance science, research, and the tools of soil health. We want to expand education and outreach to farmers. We want to leverage market opportunities. So that's not only the kind of consumer markets piece of it, but also this carbon registry market that is coming. And then, of course, as I previously mentioned, advance state policy and work with decision makers to promote and support this work, this soil health work on the ground. Let's just go to the next slide. So again, the coalition is the backbone by which we plan to advance those particular strategies. And as I said, with the support of the $1 million grant from NIFWIF, that's going to help lift this off the ground and turn it from an informal, loose coalition to a stronger, structured, functioning coalition with proactive goals and plans year by year. We, as part of the grant, we got resources to advertise and hire a full-time soil health coalition coordinator to facilitate regular meetings, to expand the coalition membership, and then of course to drive forward the strategy once it's created. And obviously Virginia Tech is the recipient of the award. There's a parallel effort in Maryland and also in Pennsylvania. So there's a regional effort to advance soil health work here in the Mid-Atlantic. So let me actually, I'm sorry I went over my time a few moments. Let me turn it over to Rory to discuss the structured outreach and marketing components of the coalition and a little bit more about the grant itself. But thanks, and looking forward to questions and discussion in just a bit.
Thank you, Emily. Hey, Rory, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, just give me a second to transfer this over. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Let's see if we can. Aha, here we go. Okay, thank you for that introduction, Emily. So as Emily mentioned, we recently received a $1 million grant for building soil health in Virginia. I lead it, which means I have the responsibility for most of the paperwork, but not for most of the work, as you'll see as I go through this. So as Emily mentioned, there is an existing Virginia Soil Health Coalition, but it's mainly just a website where people and groups have bought into soil health principles. There are no annual meetings or Zoom meetings or anything else, making sure everybody's going in the same direction. So we're going to be improving that with the soil health coordinator in Virginia. But so the principles and practices that Virginia Soil Health Coalition have bought into, they're similar practices to what Nrcs has been pushing since the time of the Dust Bowl. Keep the soil covered, leave residue on the surface, minimizing disturbance through no-till or reduced tillage, maximize living roots. And the one thing that's a little bit newer is energize with diversity. So if you're doing a cover crop, it's better to have multiple species in there rather than just one. So those are the practices that the Soil Health Coalition, all the members have bought into. Of course, there's a new $1 million grant, thanks to our sponsors. It's the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Innovative Nutrient and Sediment Reduction Program. It's mainly EPA money that flows through NIFWIF. And all of these grants require one-to-one cost share. So Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation stepped up with $800,000 in cost share through there, as they cost share a lot of cover crops and other soil health practices. And the Agwa Fund stepped up with $200,000 of cost share as well, which will help fund the coordinator position, I believe. So there are 3 pillars to this soil health grant. Emily has already discussed Pillar 1, Coalition Building and Collaboration. So we do have the Virginia Soil Health Coalition already, but there's not much talking. So we're going to hire a full-time coordinator led by Emily. They'll be based out of Richmond, not on campus here at Blacksburg, but based in Richmond, and get together with all the different groups and make sure that everybody who's funding or involved in soil health practices, everybody's talking to each other and moving in the same direction. Pillar 2 is the biggest one in terms of where the money's going. So it's soil health practice implementation through education demonstration, and the one thing we're really trying now is paid peer-to-peer mentoring. So this is something we talked to the Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance about. So they found that everybody knows they're early adopters of new technology and late adopters. And a lot of these, they're the No-Till Alliance, they get together and the early adopters teach the late adopters how to change their practices. But one of the things that they found was that the early adopters obviously are busy people. They're full-time farmers. So even though they want to do more, they didn't have the time to do more unless they were paid for it. So we're going to be paying a lot of the early adopters, people that are already doing advanced soil health practices, and getting them to teach the late adopters what to do. I mean, when you look at the soil health practices, some people are doing it because they believe it's good for their bottom line and good for their soil and good for their future. And other people are doing it because they only receive cost share dollars. Whereas the early adopters, they really believe in these practices and they wouldn't farm without them. So we're going to be leveraging the early adopter knowledge to the late adopters. And pillar 3 is the smallest pillar, but leveraging market opportunities. Are there ways where we can, if farmers are doing good practices, is there some way through marketing that they can get enhanced market value for their products? If there's some labeling or something else that shows that they're being responsible stewards of the environment. So this is a busy slide. I teach a seminar class and I always tell people not to show busy slides, but I think the text is big enough that you can see it, and I'll just spend a couple of minutes on this. So of course I'm at the top in the middle. At the top left is pillar 1. So that's what Emily Francis is going to be leading, maybe with some help from Kristen Hughes Evans of Sustainable Chesapeake. But they're going to be hiring a full-time coordinator that'll be interacting with all the project partners. Pillar 2, which is the biggest one in the red box in the middle, this is where most of the money goes. So on the left, there's the Virginia Association of Biological Farming and Brent Wills. And one of the things we dealt with is how do we accurately report acres of implementation throughout Virginia with a large number of groups. So each of these groups is going to be reporting to an agency person, either Virginia Cooperative Extension or Nrcs. So the Virginia Association of Biological Farming are going to be implementing soil health practices and reporting those to Eric Benfield. The Common Grain Alliance, it's a fairly new organization in Virginia. They try and they're going to make producers or encourage producers to follow soil health practices, and their grain then goes to make bread from grains grown in Virginia. And again, they'll report to Eric Benfield of Virginia Tech and Virginia Cooperative Extension. The one in the middle, the Virginia No-Till Alliance, Doug Horn is Virginia Tech, Virginia Cooperative Extension. He's an extension agent up in the Shenandoah Valley. But he's on the board of the Virginia No-Till Alliance, which is based up there. So their plan is to get 5 farmer mentors, so 5 early adopters, and each of those early adopters will select 5 farmers. So we'll have 25 farmers who are going to get mentored by 5 early adopter farmers, and they'll be reporting through Doug Horn back to me implementation of the soil health practices, mainly cover crops, as we've already got large implementation of no-till. The next group is the Virginia Forage and Grassland Council. They're going to be working a lot on rotational grazing to increase soil health and soil carbon. So they're doing the same model. 5 early adopter farmers are going to be mentoring 25 late adopter farmers. Then on the Eastern Shore, there's Mark Reiter of Virginia Tech, Virginia Cooperative Extension, and they were going to work with the Virginia potato and vegetable growers. It may go through a different organization now, but it's the same plan where we have 5 early adopter farmers teaching 5 farmers each 5 late adopters each, for a total of 25 farmers getting mentored in soil health practices. Because there are a lot of issues in terms of what seeds do you select for cover crops, when are the best planting dates, how do you deal with weeds, how do you kill the cover crop before planting, and things like that, that having local knowledge is very beneficial. Then along the bottom, there's Virginia Nrcs and Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. I mean, these are the two groups that fund a lot of soil health practices, cover crops, no-till, and other things in Virginia. So they're involved heavily with soil health practices. So NRCS, there's going to be a Virginia Tech employee that's going to work with them, making sure that their in-state funding can continue. They've had a shortage of personnel, and they're managing to get funding from a number of different places now to keep their in-state conservation and innovation grants going. And it will also, in Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, we're going to be paying part of Robert Schumacher's salary, because Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, they do a lot of funding for soil health practices, but they don't talk much in terms of soil health. So freeing up some of Robert's time, he's very excited about soil health, so he's going to be going through the State Technical Advisory Committee to get soil health recognized by the agency. And then at the bottom right, there's the part that I'm mainly involved with, on-farm field measurements. There's a lot of interest in if you can build soil health, can you reduce the nitrogen, or do you need to change your nutrient management in some way? So as we're going to be doing a lot of demonstration as we do these enhanced implementation practices, we're going to be taking a lot of measurements from those sites. So just a quick recap again. Pillar 1 is expanding coalition building, mainly led by Emily. And Pillar 2's locally established groups. We're not establishing any new groups. We're just using the locally established groups to expand adoption of soil health practices. And for example, the no-till farmers in Pennsylvania, they think that they can reduce the amount of nitrogen they apply from about 1 pound per bushel of corn to about 0.75. So if they do these practices, they're applying less nitrogen, and of course that'll transfer into improved water quality because they're fertilizing less. They're getting more recycling of nitrogen within their soils. And the third pillar, led by Eric Benfield, expand market opportunities. I think, yep, that's the end of my presentation. Any questions? I guess I need to click on stop sharing. It should be back to you, Eldon.
Thank you very much. Wow, that's quite a project. And that's $1 million grant over 3 years, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
But with the pandemic, it wouldn't surprise me if it was extended for a year.
Understood. Questions for Emily or Roy? Wow.
We answered them all.
Eldon, oh, go ahead, Greg.
Okay. All right. Let's go with Greg Evans first.
With the Healthy Watershed project they've been working on for the last 4 years, the focus has been on carbon credit trading with the forests, but we are also looking at the soil health is probably an extension once this gets underway. And the idea is to try to bring private capital into this field. Is that something that later on we're going to be coordinating with you folks on to make sure that the early adopters have an opportunity to participate in these carbon credit markets?
That's the plan. That's the hope. I think we're quite a few years away from having those soil health protocols in terms of what actually constitutes a carbon market registry and how do you test and verify and make sure that those practices are actually doing what numerically we think they would be doing. There's an entity, the Ecosystem Services Marketplace Consortium, who is doing field trials in a variety of states, and they are working on these protocols with some of the bigger manufacturing and General Mills, for example, is a founding member of their board. So businesses who are interested in not only having good practices through the farmers that they work with for their product, but then also the ability to, again, kind of offset and draw down their carbon use as a business. So they're interested in creating a robust carbon market around soil health. So other folks are working on that. You know, personally, I'm viewing this as a, how do we prep and prepare farmers and get kind of our mindsets and the policy opportunities set up, so when these protocols are established, how do farmers hop on that opportunity if they would want to? So that's how I'm thinking about it. I don't know if Rory, if you have other thoughts on this, but from that component of it, I think it's coming.
I don't really have much to add to that, Emily. Just one thing is, what is Virginia's soil health policy? Hopefully we'll be closer to that, or at least everybody will be talking the same language when this grant ends.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Okay, I have mine now.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, to the two speakers, the conversation about trying to get MS4 in urban communities working with rural communities for the betterment of the environment is sort of a recurring topic in these kinds of meetings that Eldon hosts. And I was wondering, I'm going to cite an example from historic past and ask the two of you, how does this fit in the current kind of environment of advocating no-till? Back in the early 90s, the Regional Waste Management Authority in Richmond found that the cheapest recycling credits that they could buy was to route their vacuum leaf collection trucks to designated farms on the periphery of the urban area where the leaves were deposited. The farmers got paid so many dollars a ton, and the farmers tilled those leaves into the soil. And after the first season, one of the participating farmers happened to be a pumpkin farmer, and he won the blue ribbon at the state fair. It was the cheapest advertising promotion we could, the farmers were coming out of the woodwork after that to participate in the program. Now, I just checked offline here during your presentations, and for some reason that program no longer is in practice here in Richmond because the leaves are now going directly into the mulching operations run by local government, and then the mulch gets applied in suburban yards and urban landscapes and so forth, instead of going back into the rural soil to improve its character. So kind of citing that example, how strong is the no-till movement, or is there an opportunity for urban localities to revisit that kind of program?
I would say that most agricultural land in Virginia is now under no-till. That's one of the reasons there's that picture in my background, the manure injector. So how do you manage manure in no-till systems or reduced till systems? But in terms of localities, I don't work in the urban environment a whole lot, other than running soil samples from urban environments in the soil testing lab. We look at how many acres of practice implementation you can get. When you look at total numbers of acres, most of that is in farming in Virginia. So we try and, or at least in my program, I was hired to target those large acreages.
And Kevin, my kind of reaction to your comments and your question are, I think what the coalition so far has kind of added to our list of considerations is how do we break down some of the urban and rural divide, and whether that's through the lens of food production and local farmers or farmers markets, or what does that look like, and kind of the marketing piece, a label that Rory mentioned earlier. I think we are interested in kind of breaking down some of that divide and having rural and urban communities be more collaborative in this space. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like, but I think your example is one example of how that might be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
I will also add to the question I believe Greg asked about the Healthy Forest, Healthy Watershed initiative that you all are running. I'll also toss into the pile in this carbon market registry space. I had a nice conversation with Elizabeth Andrews at the Virginia Coastal Policy Center, who I believe is often or sometimes on these calls. And so, you know, there's work around eelgrass carbon sequestration too. And so, you know, we've got a lot of nature-based solutions in this, you know, in Virginia and in the work in which we do. So whether that's forests, whether that's soil, whether that's eelgrass, whether that's something yet that we haven't quite explored, but I just wanted to add eelgrass and other SAVs into the grouping of potential carbon markets as well.
Okay, one more call for questions.
Well, let me just say, Eldon, as I think we wrap up this piece of it, you know, we are very interested, the kind of nascent coalition that's now becoming formalized. We are very interested in working with anyone and everyone who cares about soil health, and I imagine each of you on this call is. And so happy to follow up with anyone individually about opportunities for collaboration, about your organization or your individual interests in, you know, participating in the conversations that are going to get started. So yeah, happy to talk with anyone after this. And again, appreciate the opportunity to join you all this morning. Thank you.
Emily, thank you. And that's a great segue into a couple of comments that I was going to make. We would like to just say that we don't want to put you on the hook to come back here meeting after meeting after meeting to give us updates, but we would like to stay up on what you're doing. It is clearly a next step to what we've been working on the forest side. Especially then you got the healthy soils, but then you had the eelgrass, and to me that all of a sudden we've got the entire basin covered. We would like to continue to hear more and how we can help in whatever way is most appropriate. I would also like to ask if you two would put September 23rd on your calendar. We are supposed to be meeting in the Upper Basin. I hope that's the case. I hope we won't do more than one virtual Rappahannock River Basin Commission meeting, but I'd like to do a somewhat abbreviated version of what you did today for the technical committee for the elected officials. And I think it would be worthwhile for them to hear. We've talked about soil health a little at the commission level. They've heard the issue. We've talked in the Healthy Watershed Forest effort that ag has the potential to be included. Well, okay, now we're taking that to the next step with what you guys are talking about. And I think the elected officials need to hear what you're working on, and I think they'll be intrigued to hear your progress, because this is about fostering private investment in water quality improvement. And with that, I'm going to do one more call for questions for our presenters.
Yes, Eldon, we'd be glad, and hopefully we'll have the soil health coordinator on board by September 23rd. So they would certainly, that'd be a good thing for them to go and do. Okay,
great.
Eldon, am I on?
Go for it, Greg.
I just wanted to, I'm gonna have to jump off to be on a Chesapeake Healthy Watershed Goal Implementation Team meeting. But Emily, that group is looking at eelgrass and several other things.
Hey, Greg, you're
I
getting a
will
lot of
get
feedback.
contact.
Greg, you're getting feedback. Can you turn the sound off of either your computer or, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
That's better.
I will get you a contact to give to Emily to plug her into the Healthy Watersheds goal implementation team. Because in the future, they're going to be coordinating into this.
Will do.
And I've got to sign off at this point to be on that call.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Okay. Roy and Emily, we're excited for what you guys are doing, and look forward to some tremendous progress over the next 3+ years. We know what that's like as we worked on the forestry end of it. We started kicking around in 15, and here we are 5 years later. You still try, it just keeps getting stretched out. With that, you see on your agendas the meeting schedule for the technical committee. Our next meeting will be June 24th. As I indicated at the last meeting, as long as we're doing these solely virtually, I'm trying to keep the agenda limited so that we don't take too much of everybody's time. We'll be working to get everything in place for a virtual June commission meeting. As I indicated, look for an email later today now that I've made that commitment. And we'll be using this same platform. I know that for some state agencies, they have some issues. VITA doesn't let them use their computer link. They have to call in. But hopefully that will improve as we go forward, and Zoom will do whatever they need to do to make VITA happy. With that, any other comments, suggestions, thoughts for the betterment of things? Let's see, I've got a comment here. Oh no, just very, very good presentation, as Dave Evans says. Any other final thoughts? Okay, we'll welcome our new member, Matthew Decatur, to the group, and we'll look forward to maybe seeing you at a future meeting, Matthew. With that, everybody have a great day. Thanks for being with us, and if you've got some follow-up or some thoughts to pass along to our presenters or any other of our topics, just send me an email and we'll keep the dialogue going.
Thanks, Eldon. Thanks, presenters. Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paige. Well done.